Hello and welcome to today's Criterion Learning Series presentation. My name is Steve Tompkins, Principal Solutions Architect with Criterion. Today, I will be showing you employee engagement within Criterion. While I'm switching over to my browser, I do want to remind everybody that we do have a chat and a Q&A feature that you can use if you do have any questions on what you're seeing. And if we can, we'll answer it during the webinar. If we can't, we will follow up with you and make sure that question does get answered. So as you can see here, self-service is a great example of where employee engagements is going to land. Now, it also is available in the mobile app, but perfect example is right there in the middle, the feed that shows the image that I selected today and some text and things like that. So we're going to talk about that. We'll also talk about how the widgets are turned on in self-service and things like events and the links and things like that. So let's go ahead and do that. Of course, we need to go to the settings to configure that, and then I'll show you how to create a post so you'll get an idea of how that works there. All right. Now, what we are doing over here in the settings are a few different things to set this up to allow us to do employee engagement. So one of the very first things that we actually need to do is to make sure that we have groups configured within the system here, because that's one way that we're going to do, as an example, that feed is say which groups are allowed to view it and edit it and things like that. So you'll want to make sure that there's at least one group in here, but different groups for the different audiences for the things like the feed and the events and stuff like that. So these are set up in one of two ways. One is a dynamic group, and you'll see I have some that are dynamic, and then the other is a static group. So here you can see an example of an active employee group that I called. My formula is very simple. It basically is true. And because I checked off this box that says dynamic and I have this formula true, it's going to include all active employees within this employer. Now, if you have multiple employers, you may want to have the name with the employer name in it. That might make it easier for you to know which one's which, but you're not required to do that. So you don't have to, I don't have to put AFC Richmond active employees. Now, your formula might be more complicated than that, than just simply true. Here's another example where I'm saying that the flag is salary is not equal to true. And that's what that exclamation point equal sign means, is not equal to. And then, of course, true. So you can see how that works there. Now, if you're curious on how those formulas work, of course, you can reference the help here. And you scroll down and there'll be some example formulas right here. So like if I was doing the exempt employees, this is an example of that. Assignment detail is exempt is equal to false. You'll notice how there's two equals there. All right. And you can, of course, click on this help article to find out about more functions and tokens and things like that you can use in your formulas. And of course, if you do have questions, you can always reach out to us and we'll be happy to give you some guidance on that formula that you might need. Now, because it's dynamic, I have this list of employees that meet the criteria. As you can see, I can't remove them because they meet this criteria of not being salaried. So that's why I see them here. And of course, if I change the status of their salary to be equals to true, let's say on Glenn here, he would drop off the list. All right, you'll see some other options you have here. So do you want to include terminated employees? Perhaps you do. Maybe you have a special feed just for terminated employees when they log into self-service. So you might want to check that box off for that situation. Future employees. So maybe you're allowing people to do onboarding in the system and you want to show them the feed, but they're not starting until next week or next month or something. If they meet the criteria and they're future dated, then that would choose that right there. All right, unimproved employees. So that has to do with the workflows and things like that. So if they're not approved, they perhaps could be in this group. Daily recalculated. So if you want the group to recalculate and verify this list is correct daily, then you want to check this off. Now you are limited to the number that you can do daily recalculated. So if you check off every single one as daily recalculated, they won't all daily recalculate. I know there's a limit. I believe it is 5 or 10, if I recall. But you don't necessarily need this, because if you're looking at something like, let's say, is salary is not equal to true, when I change somebody's record on their position, and I say that they're not salaried or they are salaried, it'll recalculate. So I don't have to daily recalculate in that situation. If you did have one in here that maybe was date related and it was looking at they've been here for at least 90 days, then it might make sense to daily recalculate because obviously the days change every day. So that is done by the system task, the daily system task to daily recalculate. And then if I am referencing something like here, the assignment detail, maybe I want to include their secondary or additional assignments. So I could check that off. So that's an overview of your groups. And just to talk about the other kind, which is a static group, this is where I can manually add people to groups. So this Jackie and Ozzy group, if I wanted to add somebody to it, just hit this plus, find the right person and add them into the group. And then save that. Now I can also do this on an employee record. If I go to an employee, let's just pick Ted here, under miscellaneous ILC groups. And the ones that I cannot delete are the dynamic ones, but if I wanted to add him to one, I can click add. And only those ones that are static groups would show up here. So now this would add up to that Jackie and Ozzy group. Now, the reason this is important is when we're doing like the employee feed, you may want to say that only certain people can post or only certain people can edit. So that might be helpful to have a static group to do that because maybe it's like administrators and they don't all have something in common. It's kind of spread out over the company, and rather than like putting employee numbers in or something, you just manually add them to the group. So that's where a static group could be very useful. Of course, groups are used throughout the system in a number of other places. I'm going to focus today on the employee engagement places. All right, so those are your groups. Now, first thing I'm going to talk about is that community, that feed out there, and then we'll come back to company events and the links and stuff like that. So first off, you'll see employee engagement. Now, I'm not going to talk about the ENPS and the surveys and stuff like that. I'm going to focus on the communities, the badges, and things like that up here. So the communities. Now, that community you just saw out here in self-service that said webinar, here is that community right here. All right, so very easy to configure this. All right, so as you can see here, I can configure the group. Now, this one's already configured, but as you can see, I can have an icon for here. That icon would show up in there. So if I want to make like, oh, this is an announcement one, little icon for announcements, or, maybe it's an ideas group or something, I could create different or use different icons for that there. Of course, the name of it can be anything you like. I called it webinar because kind of simple like that, but it can be whatever you like there. Here, you can choose which employers are able to see this. If you just have one employer, you don't need to worry about it. But if you do have two, you might want to have it for both. All right. So of course, it does need to be active to be used. If it's not active, it can still exist, but it won't be used. The daily recap, I'll show you what that looks like here in a second. So I'm going to enable that just so you can see what that looks like. And then restricting badges. So this means you would not be able to do badges within that community. And then here, like I said, it's a requirement. The employee groups, which groups are able to look at this? So when I hit plus here, you'll see the active employees are able to view it because just this is checked. If I want to allow them to post, it would be this right here. All right, if I go down, you'll see I do have a second one here called mass form assignment. This one can post. Now, you may want to have a different group allowed to edit and delete. So maybe you allow, let's say, your managers to post, but HR has like a final approval, or maybe they can edit or delete the message that the managers post. So I might say, oh, that Jackie and Ozzy group, they can post and they can also edit and delete. All right, so that's how that works. And of course, if I was a member of all three of these, it's going to allow me to do all three because I have those abilities. If I'm only a member of active employees, I can't do those other two things. All right, I'll just say confirm here. Now, if you want to put a description for the group, the community, you can do that here and type in, I use this community for posting webinar information, something like that. All right, and of course, you can set up as many different communities as you want. Maybe you want one for just like a certain group of employees, like just for a certain department or something. Maybe like this car audio department is the only people. And so I might say this is the car audio department. And then maybe like the manager of that would have a second group. I call it like car audio manager, and they're the ones who can post. All right, so just like that, I can make separate groups. Now, where this comes up is when I do the posting itself, it'll ask me which one do I want to post it to. All right, so that's how you can set up whatever communities you like in there. Let me show you how this actually works after you set up the communities. All right, so I have this one here called webinar and some other ones that I have out here. When I go back over to here into my feed, because I'm allowed to post, because I'm a member of a group where I'm allowed to post, I have this option here. If I'm, maybe just an employee who cannot post, I wouldn't even see this box here because I'm not allowed to do it, but I would still see the feeds for those communities where I am a member. But because I can post, you'll see here I have these different options. So I can put a subject line on here. If maybe this is something I just want to let everybody know about something happening this week. I might want to say, company party this week. All right, maybe I want to expire it because the party is on Friday. And so after Friday, let's go ahead and expire it there. Here's the badges. So this is something where if I want to give somebody, like a blue ribbon or I don't know, hats off or star or those types of things, you can create badges. I'll talk about that as soon as I can. If there's an attachment, so maybe I want to attach a document to this and, whatever, it's a PDF and I want to include that in there, I could attach something. All right, I want to pin it to the top. You'll notice this is pinned to the top, which means it'll go to the top of the list and it'll pin based on the order they're posted. So if I pin two things, the last one posted or the last one, the last one posted will be here at the top. Otherwise, this would be below all the pins and then in the order that they were created. All right. Reminder that we have a company party on Saturday. See you there. Now, of course, I could have left that misspelling. We don't have a spell checker there, but if you use something, let's say like Grammarly or whatever, you could use that to correct your spelling. And of course, maybe I want to do something with fonts and, change the size and colors. I can use those right here, to do that right there. This is if I wanted to have a link to something, maybe, you've got a flyer link or something, you want to link that out there. An example of this image, what I do is I just copy and paste. So I have an image on my computer and I copy and I paste it into there. So let me show you, that employee engagement one, I'll use that one as an example. I have it open in another window here. I copy and I paste it in. So just using Control V in my situation to do that. All right. So that works there. And here's the communities that I can post to. So these are the only two that I'm allowed to post to based off of the rules that are over here. So you'll see there's another one here called announcements. I can't post to that one. I can repost to these two because I'm allowed to. All right, so I would choose whichever one I want. Let's choose the training and post that there. It'll take a second to refresh, and there it is. I don't know where the other one went. Maybe I'm not sure where the other one went, why it went away. That's weird, because this is obviously an older one. I'll have to figure out what happened to that. But also, just to show you what happens is I have notifications turned on, and it did put a message here that there's a notification. And if I had the email and text ones, I would see that right there. All right, so here you'll see now in my situation, I do allow replies and likes here. So I could say, somebody could reply and say, can't wait, or something like that. And they put a reply in there. All right. And somebody else might put some other reply and they might like it and stuff like that. So if you want to enable that, you can, to allow people to edit, put those in there. All right. Now I talked about the daily recap. So that is a separate board from the community that I can go into and do those things. And that's where it happened. I don't know why these got moved over to the daily recap, but they did. But this allows you, maybe if you want to have your employees at the end of the day say what they did for the day, you can enable a daily recap and then they could post in here. I conducted a webinar and met with John to discuss the sales presentation. Right. And then, of course, they can post to that. Now, they can only post to the communities that allow daily recap. All right. So that's why I only see that one there. That's what daily recap is. It's just like any other community post, but it's a separate little tab if you want to do that. right? So that's an example of a daily recap. Let's talk about badges real quick. So first thing you probably want to do is configure those badges. And we come with these 7. These are the 7 default badges out here, but you can create your own. The badges do allow you to have points. So for an example, maybe after 5 of these achievements, this person, the people who get this badge, receive a gift card or something like that. So you can have the system accumulate points for people and then, do that. Now here you'll see I can also basically charge the person who posts this a certain number of points too. So maybe I'm only allowed to give out 10 points a year or something like that. So that way I don't just say like, well, everybody gets an achievement because I'm just going to game the system and get everybody gift cards. You might say, well, you're limited to 10 points or 20 points. So yes, you can give out these things, but don't go overboard and just give it out every day to every single employee. So you can do that there. I could make it 0 if I just want to allow them to do that. And of course, I could do a different number here. Maybe the achievement is 1 and the team player is 5 or something like that. I can go ahead and do those. Now, I also can have my own badge here. If I wanted to have a different one out there, a different icon, maybe like I said, you do some type of like gold medal or blue ribbon or something like that. You can use that image, go ahead and just, maybe you already have it somewhere on a server or you find it on Google or something, load it in here, fill in the description and the points and use that other image that you want for that. So very straightforward. In fact, I can even use that employee engagement one if I wanted to. And then, call this the Great Engagement Award. All right. And I'm going to say this is 1 and 1 there. All right. So an example of that is my award right there. Now, it is something I can use in the community. I do need to enable badges in the community. So I can't do it for everyone necessarily, but that's what this icon is right here. I can say, all right, here's the community called announcements. That one I am allowed to do badges. Here's the recipient. So I can say, oh, Gordon gets the Great Engagement Award. All right, you'll see how it's got his name over here. Gordon did a great job engaging with the clients. All right, and post it out here. So send points is 1, can't be greater than, oh, I should have checked. I have 0 points allowed. Let me show you where that is set up here. So I believe it's over here. I'm trying to remember, here it is. Badges. So I have 0 allowed. I apologize. I should check that first. Give myself 10 here. And now I'll be able to do that. Let's see, I might have to, nope, I didn't have to. Okay, so now that I have that, it now is going to have that message out there saying, Gordon did a great job and show his little image that I've got right there. All right, so that's the badges as part of the community and allows you to do that. Now, what will happen also is Gordon, on his profile, he'll have a little badge over here under his image if he has one, or just his name. He'll have this little image here, and it will tell them how many. So if he gets like 6 of these, it'll show 6. And then show that badge with 6 of them. And of course, if you have multiple badges, you'll see all of them there. All right, and then of course over here, I can see what I've given out and also what I've received. All right, so that way I can see that. So if I go to Gordon, I'll be able to see his what he's received there. I believe it's Gordon Frank. And there you go. All right, so that's the badges in the community and how that works there. Let's go ahead and look at the company events. So up here under HR administration is company events. All right, and I already have one set up for this year, so I'm just going to use that one, but you would want to set one of these up for every year. You're going to have company events. And you can have ones for different groups though. So you might want to say like 2025 accounting events, and 2025 all employee events, whatever. You can have different ones out there for different groups of employees. That's where, again, the groups come into play. And here you can see, actually, I had the wrong date on the company picnic, but that's okay. I'll show you how to create a new event. So all I do is click add here. What is the date of it? And I can say company picnic. And have that out there. And maybe I want to say, quarter end Q2 end date is the second one. So I can have as many as I want out here. Now, what will happen is in self-service, if I have the widget enabled, which I'll show you in a moment, it will show those company events, but only if there's actually one in the future. Once they've all expired, let's say July 1st, I wouldn't see that widget anymore because there's no more company events for me. So just to verify the widget is enabled, I'm going to go to ESS widgets here, and I do have events enabled. So if you set up events they're not showing, make sure in your ESS widgets it's configured. Right. Okay, so that is how I have to have that configured. And now all I need to do is to see it is refresh. Now it doesn't automatically pop up if I happen to be on self-service. I have to, at some point refresh or log back in again to see the company events. So here you can see. Now this is where I was saying you might want to put a nice label about what this is. Maybe you want to say department events or accounting events or something like that. So it doesn't just say 2025. That's the description of that event calendar. And so I can see that there. And speaking of calendars, you can make a calendar of the events if you want to do that. So over here is calendar. I believe we had a calendar one earlier. Here we see I have one called events and holidays, but I'll show you. I just need to have company events in the content type. And then if I'm doing like iCalendar, it can even show up in my Outlook or whatever I use for my calendars. But that way I can have a calendar over here for events and holidays. And you can see, there they are. All right, so that's the company events and how that works. Let me talk about the external links and where those are set up. So it's not under employee engagement. It's actually here under the self-service links. It also, I'm going to show you videos because you may want to have those as a link out there and just to show you how the videos work. But here I'll show you self-service links. Now you may have noticed I had two of them out there right here. And so those are the two that are visible right here. Now this doesn't use the groups to determine whether or not I can see them. If I add one here, it's going to be available to everybody. So I can't just have a link over here like just for the people in accounting. All right, it's going to be there for everybody within the company. You'll notice I do have the company here, but it's going to be within the company. So if I want to have a link, let's say to Google, and then I just put in the address. Of course, you can copy and paste this. Oops. And save. Now, we do support single sign-on and those types of things. So if you do have a website you want to single sign-on into, perhaps there's like a benefits provider and they have single sign-on, reach out to support or your implementation or your partner to help out with that. I can't go through it all right now. I don't have enough time, but there's a settings that you need to put in to pass that information. And you'll also have to know like what is it needed on the other side, the other website you're going to single sign on into. So, but now that I have Google here, when I come back out to self-service, I'm going to see Google as an external link. Of course, I click this, it's going to go over to Google. All right, so you can see that right there. All right, so that's the self-service links. Let me talk about videos here so you can see that because videos don't show up necessarily here. Now you can have like a video that you save and then a link over here, but where they do show up is right here under the resources, you'll see company videos. So here's the video here. Now the videos are very similar to the links in that it does need to be a URL. You cannot load in, like you can't upload a video into the system. We don't support that. So what you would do is find your video somewhere, YouTube, Vimeo, whatever video hosting service you're using, and put the URL in there for that. Now you can set who is able to view those videos by making it public. So public means that it is visible here when I go to company videos. All right, so if I don't want it public, I can turn that off, and then maybe I just have the link and I share it maybe just like in onboarding, or I just have a link that goes off to it for certain people that I share. So if I don't want it visible there, I can do this here. This will allow me to go and view it if I want to go and view that video. So, this is I think it's an old video on how to use timesheets. It opened up a separate window for me and is showing me how to do timesheets. All right, so That's what that did. Very similar to the videos there. Now, same type of thing with company documents. You may want to upload, let's say, your handbook or something like that. You'll see that right here under documents. All right, so here's the location. Now you can create different folders if you like. As you see, I have like W2, T4, etc. So if I wanted to do like, handbook policies folder, I can go here and add a folder and call this, I don't know, say material data sheets. So material data sheets. All right, so maybe you work with chemicals, you need those material data sheets. If there is this folder here, this one I actually can do a little configuration on who can see this. You'll see here it says access not restricted. This one is restricted, so I can go in here and I can actually set which groups can see this folder. So I might say this is only for the Jackie and Ozzy group to see those material data sheets. And you'll notice it changed it to a little lock. So that created that folder. And now if I want to add something to it, I can add documents into that, just like you see this here as I got like ACA forms or T4. I can add documents in there, but here's how you add a document. Very straightforward. Again, here's the employer that it's access to. Here's the file itself. So I think I have like a sample handbook I can load in there. There you go. It's a generic one I had ChatGPT create for me. And what type of a document? Now, these are something you create in your code tables. So you may want to, if you don't have one already for handbooks or something like that, you might want to do that. I'm just going to call it legal forms. And then I'm going to call this employee handbook. Go ahead and make it public. And if I want to show the dates, because I want everybody to know this is as of June 5th, I can now save that. And there's my employee handbook. All right, of course, here you'll see I can like download a copy of it. I can view it, I can delete it, and I can edit it if I want to edit it. All right. If I make it for like all employees, I can do something like that. All right, now where does that become visible? Company documents. There it is right there. All right, you'll notice that the material data sheets folder is here. I'm a member of that group, so I can see it. And if I want to upload something in there, I could do that. All right, now there's of course other things we can do here in the employee engagement. I know I said I'm not going to talk about surveys, so I'm going to skip that, but let's talk about confidential reporting. And the reason I'm skipping this is we have separate webinar just about surveys. That's what ENPS is about. So I'm going to talk about confidential reporting. This one is fairly simple. This allows you to have confidential messages sent to one or more employees from other employees. So if somebody might see something and want to report it to, HR, payroll, whoever it is. So you can call it whatever you like. I've called mine confidential reporting, but you can call this anything you like. Here, if you want to have a little like description, you can do that. It's not a requirement. And then my situation, I wanted to notify these two people. So you don't have to go into the system and look at the confidential reporting. It'll notify Chris and Ted that it's done. All right, now you can only have one type per employer. So if I go to this one, I can only have one. I can have a different one for graduate school versus AFC Richmond, but I can't have like two different ones in here for this one company. And then what happens is confidential reporting is right here. All right, and then you could say, there are some dangerous wires in the bathroom. I saw there were wires hanging from the ceiling, all right, whatever it might be, and send that in. Okay, so I sent that in, and of course I did notify Ted, so he's going to see that there's a new confidential report issued by an employee. All right, and he, of course, now depending on if I have my system set up right, he'll also get an email and or a text in there. I have 30 seconds. Let me talk real quick about feedback because this is the last one, but it is important. Now, when you're doing feedback, this is not like a full-on performance review. It just allows you to have employees provide feedback on other employees or request feedback from other employees. So you do need to set up some questions. And here you can see I've got 2. How did I perform at practice this week? Did you like the training this week? And this is very simple to add. You just click add, and what is your question? You know, please provide feedback on the coaching staff. All right. And it's active. If it's not active, it's not going to be a question I can ask. So now I've got that in there. So you need to set these up. If I want it to be anonymous, so it wouldn't say that I provided the feedback, it would just say anonymous has provided the feedback. I can do that right there. Otherwise, it's going to say Ted provided this feedback about Chris or something like that. And then this is over here. You'll see I have a widget for feedback. That is something that I would enable in self-service, the ESS widgets. And here I can give feedback to somebody else. I can say here, like I mentioned, I want to say Chris. Let me refresh so it shows those 2. Or the new one, not just those 2. And here we go. Chris did a good job running practice. All right, and well done. Now, maybe I thought he didn't do a good job at all, or everything was really disorganized or something. I could say he needs to improve. So those are the 2 options right there, well done or to improve. I can add another question. So I might say, oh, I also want to mention, how did I perform? Well, I did great because Chris did a great job teaching us, so maybe I want to put another thing in there. And you can have, obviously I've got 3, so I can put 3 in there. And then I send this. Now, this does get recorded on Chris's record of feedback that he's received. And then also Ted gets a record showing feedback he's provided. So just to show you where that is, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it is under performance. All right, so feedback here, let me go to Ted. So here, this would show anything that he's received, and I can do this right here and do date range and look for stuff that's just only the stuff well done. I can also request feedback as an HR person from other people. So I might say, oh, Chris and Charlene and Colin, can you please provide feedback on Ted? And they would do that right there. Now, if I go to Chris, I'm going to see that feedback that he has received. And there you go. You can see that was right there. And of course, maybe I only want to see the ones that he needs to improve, or I want to see it in a date range. I can do that. And then this is visible here as well under the performance. You'll see my feedback. This shows both sides. So anything that's been received, anything that I've given. All right. And again, as a manager or as this person now, I can request feedback just like I could do that in HR. And I also can do that right from here. So either way. Okay, so that's the employee engagement, not the surveys, but all the other employee engagement here in self-service. I do want to thank you for attending today. We will have this posted up into our YouTube for you to review if you have any questions on it. I didn't see anything coming in across questions and answers, so thank you. For any feedback you want to provide, you can follow up with sales or not sales, the support or your partner. Sales probably wouldn't know what to do with it. But if you do have any questions, please reach out to our support team. So let's do one last thing. We'll talk about our upcoming schedule here. And let me switch that across real quickly here. All right. So in 2 weeks, what we're going to do is we're going to go revisit payroll, which we did a couple of weeks ago on incomes, but this time we're going to be talking about deductions. So if you're interested in that, how they're set up, or you have questions about it, those types of things. Of course, we're not going to go into any one specific company's deductions. I'm going to be keeping it generic, but if you have questions about certain things, we're going to hopefully answer those and show you how those all work. And then we might reschedule this one. Whoops, I'm so sorry. We might reschedule this one here because of a holiday. In fact, I think what we'd like to do is maybe get a little feedback. I think Brittany's going to reach out to people to see if we should reschedule this because this is a holiday week for the US, and we might push this to the 10th. So we'll keep you updated on there, but tentatively this is on July 3rd. Custom fields and screens, so you can learn how those are created. And then, of course, 2 weeks after that would be leave of absence. And around that time frame as well, towards the end of July, will be our webinar for the next update, the 25R2 update, will be towards the end of July, and the very first webinar, learning series webinar we have after that is going to cover some topics from there. So they're not on here yet, but we do have some exciting features coming out, and so we'll be talking about those in either late July or early August, depending on what happens with this week here. So thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it, and we hope to see you again real soon. Thanks again.